Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rattlecast, the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet. So glad you could join me. Tonight is Oscar night, but once again, we'll apologize to them and try not to steal too much of their crowd. Hopefully, a lot of people are ready for some wonderful poetry. We have a great show tonight. Judith Fox is the guest. She's going to be here in about 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. And we're going to start out like we always do with Poets Respond, our news poem of the week. And we have an interestingly accidentally themed show a bit today because we have Judith wrote a book called I Still Do about loving and living with Alzheimer's, and we have a poem as our poem of the day today by Greg Hughes about memory loss as well, and Greg Hughes is here to talk about it. Hey Greg, how you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And so I wanted to ask how this poem came to be. What was the news article that triggered it? You explain it in your note, but for those who didn't read the note, what inspired this poem and why does it exist?
Yeah, I picked up my phone one day and I had a text from my wife with this news article, and I'm sorry to say that's not an uncommon occurrence, right? For the past couple of months, like it feels like we receive like a alarming news article of some sort surfacing on our phones. And this one though really struck me. There was something about the specificity of the spoonful of microplastics that might be in your brain. There was something very kind of imagistic about that sort of lingered with me. And I think just thinking along those lines, I kind of put pen to paper, and the poem started very differently. It was actually much more comical. I had a stanza that sort of opened looking at invoking different types of spoons, slotted demi-tasse, grapefruit spoons, ladles, how big is the spoon? And then these other scenes sort of started to emerge in the hospital, and it became a much more sort of personal reflection. And I thought about kind of the real estate that a spoon occupies and what is it taking real estate from. And so those scenes started to emerge, and then it went in a very kind of different direction. And then I had a friend and a fellow poet review it, and he did that thing that great editors do, which is like he pinpointed a stanza and said, I think this is where the poem really wants to start. And it helped me shed a lot of that other stuff and really get to the emotional core with what I was trying to say. So yeah, it was a short but kind of but varied process, and one I'm happy to have experienced.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because a lot of times the poems that we pick end up being those ones that just sort of run off and have a life of their own. I think we mentioned that last week. And so having time within the week to write and have some editing and feedback is really helpful too. So I'm glad you could do that. Do you want to share your poem now?
I'd love to.
Sure.
Your brain may have a spoon's worth of microplastics. In the hospital, my stepfather wakes. They ask him who is president. Well, what year is it? He jokes, as if there will never be a time he won't remember, as if plastic the size of an ice cream scoop isn't lodged in his brain like a forgotten moon. Sometimes he forgets our names, but never Gary Anderson, whose missed field goal kept the Vikings from the Super Bowl in 1998, or some obscure blues singer from Butte, a record he and my mother play in the living room, swaying, as if the air might resuscitate a stranger's face. We don't get to choose what we remember. Our brains are plastic, single use, uncapped, emptied, tossed in a blue bin, processed at a recycling center 30 miles from heaven. Exiled angels scrub the residue with latex gloves. Tiny pieces of the things we loved, upcycled, reclaimed. She repeats her name. He searches for the answer behind his eyes, like a door locked from the inside. like he's trying to cut a steak with a plastic knife, like he's sculpting her face from someone else's memory.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. And once again, that was Your Brain May Have a Spoon's Worth of Microplastics by Greg Hughes. Really quick, I just wondered, you mentioned, I think, in an email that you work in marketing by day. And so I wonder, like, what the place is for poetry in your life. Does it feel like it's a part of that career as well, or do you feel like it's like something separate that you can get outside of yourself and escape to?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. It's something, I've actually have a background in playwriting of all things, and that segued into a career in theater marketing. And so most of the clients I work with are nonprofit theaters and arts organizations. And I just connected with poetry about around a year ago, and it was just a way for me to express myself personally, to do something where I didn't really have an expectation for what the byproduct was. I try to be very, I try to remove myself and my kind of ego from the process and to look at everything like it's malleable, like it's a draft, like and that's really helped me in my creative life to have that. So if I do compartmentalize it in that way, I think it's just like I love to take kind of the expectation away, and I find when I do that, it's actually very liberating.
Yeah, well, that's really cool to hear, and I'm really glad to have you on tonight and sharing this poem. And hope you come back and keep sending poems in every week.
Will do. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me.
yeah. Thanks so much, Greg. And once again, that was Greg Hughes with his poem today. Your brain may have a spoon's worth of microplastics. One of those terrifying headlines that we see so often. It really is. He putting it in that detail of a spoon's worth really makes it stark. Anyway, that is the poem of the day. If you are subscribed to the poem of the day, you get one in your inbox every day by email. If you don't, go to rattle.com. At the footer there, you'll see our link to sign up for the poem of the day. So do check that out. If you don't, you get a new poem in your inbox every morning. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, the fascinating Judith Fox. She's got so much going on in her life, such a wonderful, interesting person. We'll be here in just a few minutes, so sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Judith Fox. Judith is an award-winning fine art photographer, poet, public speaker, and business leader. The temporary service she founded in Richmond, Virginia in 1978 was purchased by a New York Stock Exchange firm in 1996. During her business career, Fox served on many for-profit and non-for-profit boards, was a public speaker and consultant. After selling her company, Judith devoted herself full-time to photography and writing. Fox award-winning photographs are in the permanent collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, the Museum of Photographic Arts, and many other places. Fox's photographs have been exhibited in solo and group shows in the United States and Europe. After her book, I Still Do, which we have here, Loving and Living with Alzheimer's, was released, Fox became a global advocate for Alzheimer's awareness and education. She's been a speaker and consultant on Alzheimer's and family caregiving for corporations, nonprofit associations, and universities. I Still Do was named one of the best photography books of 2009 by Photo Eye magazine. Judith lives and works in Southern California and is currently working on a collection of poetry. You can find all of her work at judithfox.com. And here she is, Judith Fox. Hey, Judith, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's so great to have you on. You're one of those poets. I always look for poets that have, lives beyond poetry that are interesting. And so when it was Katie who found you at the Pacific MFA program, and she said, you've got to have Judith on. She's got such a fascinating life. And so I looked into it a little bit, and wow, you sure do. So it's really fun to have you here. Do you want to start out pretty quickly with a poem, and then we'll talk more?
I'd like to do that, but before I do that, may I take a second to congratulate you and Katie on your very recent wedding?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
to
that
the
was just...
two of you.
Oh, thanks. Yes, I'll cheers my water too. Thank you.
And also to thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do, both of you, for poetry and poets. And thank you for the introduction and for having me here.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to start with the poem that was accepted by Rattle. And this is about my first husband. I'll just for context, I've been widowed twice. And I want to say that so that it's not too confusing when I read some of these different poems. How it happened. I thought I'd be at his side when he died. Didn't think I'd find his body. Relied on the clinician who said his cancer will take time to spread. But death struck my husband with a lizard-quick tongue, snatched him as he was reading, a torn theater stub tucked between pages, marking his place. I was washing dishes a room away, a thin wall apart, belting out songs I'll never sing again, believing we had months, thinking there was time enough to dry a second cup.
Yeah, it's a powerful poem, and it's that image at the end, that thing there was time enough to dry a second cup, which of course is a beautiful metaphor, but also literally just powerful standing there. That was How It Happened by Judith Fox from last spring's issue of Rattle, I believe. And so, Judith, I'm really curious about your background, and 'cause it's been a long journey into poetry, doing so many other things. What can you tell us about being, founding a company? It's something I don't know if we've had a poet on who's founded a company. So, what was that like? And is it something, Alan Fox, our founding editor, no relation to Judith Fox, I should say, had a similar thing where he founded a real estate company, and he always loved poetry. Growing up, and he loved Shakespeare and E. Cummings and loved the idea of being a poet, but then ended up building a business and sort of forgot about it all until he was around 50 years old or so. What was that journey like for you, and what was the building business aspect of it?
Actually, the final decision to start a business, I've done a lot of different things. My brief corporate background was in human resources. But when I was 21, I decided to see if I could be a freelance writer. And I wrote a nonfiction article for national magazines. It was accepted and published first in the Progressive magazine, then in US Catholic. So I was off and running, I thought. And then I started to do more of that. And I had the opportunity, this is years later, so I'm doing some skipping around because there was photography in between here. But I had the opportunity to interview Norman Lear, write an article about him for the Saturday Evening Post, and it was on spec. And when I completed the article and sent it to the editor, she said, I really love what you've done, but we have a new publisher and we're going in a new direction. So that was a crossroads for me. And I had to really think about what do I want to do next and why do I want to do it? And I loved a lot about writing, but what didn't appeal to me was the idea of then rewriting that kind of article, looking for a new place, marketing it again. And I had managed a temporary service out of Washington, D.C., and thought the business was very interesting and very complex, really, and thought that I could do it better and differently. And that's really how I did it. My husband and I took a second mortgage on our house and just decided to go for it.
So, what do you think? I mean, that idea, of taking that leap of faith or just of hopeful, leap of hope, maybe to found something, put everything on the line, and start fresh in a new endeavor. And that's something that's really rare. It's sort of the entrepreneurial spirit that some people have. But I myself, I feel like that's one deficit I've always had, is that I don't take big enough risks. I'm a little too cautious with things, and I guess it takes all kinds. We need the whole tribe to have both daring people and more cautious people. But is that the way that you've always gone through life? It would seem like that to be the case, that you jumping into these different domains as you have, taking risks seems like something that you're not afraid of, right?
Yes and no. What I realized is that everybody defines risk differently. And people have asked me before, oh my goodness, that was such a risky thing to do. And it didn't feel like a risk to me. Um, you might like to jump from planes, and I would think that's crazy risky. So it's never been a risk to me, and there have been a lot of entrepreneurs in my family. So I think it was just something that I was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's just such a great way to go through life. I think you get so much more out of it if you are willing to take risks and take on challenges and don't hesitate. And I think you see when people that start new things and leap into new things, that's what they're doing. So it's really neat to hear. Do you want to read another poem? What do you want to read next?
Absolutely. I'm going to read Almost Armored. To keep me from yielding to longing, from bowing to the leaden lacuna your death left, I girdle the root ball of my grief in tin, place with it an ivory comb to tend its growing hair, lay my hunger in a steel-lined box, bury it in a wind-carved cave.
That is Almost Armored. Another poem, similarly, that has those really, really specific, concrete details. And you can see, I think, the influence of photography in your poetry in those moments. So what was it, when you retired from the business world, you moved in first to photography, and then sort of poetry after that? It seems like the progression. So why was it that photography was the first thing you went for?
Actually, both were in my life very early, as was painting and other art, actually. Um, the first poem after Dick and Jane that I remember really reading and loving, the first book rather, was A Child's Garden of Verses. And I still have the poem that my father wrote to me on my first birthday. So poetry has been in my head, in my heart since I was a kid. And when I was 9, I sold packets of seeds door to door because one of the prizes I could win was a brownie camera. And I wanted to photograph. So these are threads that have just woven through my life from the earliest days on, and I've moved back and forth between them. So I had a photography studio when my son was just born, basically. So photography started very early and again was woven in with writing. And when I did some of my magazine articles, I illustrated them with my photography. So I've never built walls between these things that I enjoy, and they kind of weave in and weave out of each other. So you're right. I went into fine art photography though before poetry. And in a way, I mean, I don't know if you're going to show the books and what the text in my in my photography book looks like, but I wasn't consciously thinking that I was writing poetry. But if you look at it, there's a lot of white space and it's lineated and there are stanzas. So guess what?
Yeah, well, let's take a look. Yeah, let's take a look at that book.
Okay,
I'll
sure.
put it on screen now. So this is Judith's book, or one of her two books of photography. I Still Do, Loving and Living with Alzheimer. She's the beautiful cover. And these are all photographs of your husband.
Correct. My
And
second
so here,
husband.
yeah, your second husband. There's the cover photograph. And above, for those just listening, it's a photograph from above of him sitting at a table. And then we have the photographs here. So here's a portrait of him. And then on the opposite page, we have this little poem-like piece, it really is a poem too. So tell us more about this wonderful book that you wrote.
It started really as an artistic challenge to myself because my husband was 16 years older than I. I thought he was very handsome. We were very much in love. And I had read a book called The Model Wives, and it was a book about iconic male photographers and their muses, who were all women and mostly young women. And I thought about the fact that there isn't a book called The Model Husband. And then I realized that I'd only been taking snapshots of my husband. And I decided to see what I could do with him as my muse and kind of, in a way, fill that gap. Because there are so few female artists and female photographers who do photograph their husbands. And when I finished and had a portfolio of work, I took it to a photography museum director, and my hope was that it might be a gallery or a museum show. And he said, "No, you've got a book here,"
Hmm.
and that had never occurred to me. And when he said that, I thought about it for a minute, and I said, "Well, what about the Alzheimer's?" And he said, "Don't go there."
Oh, really? Hmm.
He said publishers don't like that. They won't know where to put your book. It stands alone as it is. The photographs are great. You'll just confuse them.
Hmm.
And I gave it a couple of hours thought, really. And Alzheimer's, as we all know, is a terrible disease. And it's the caregiving experience, especially back then, which was in the late 1990s. It was deep in the closet. Nobody discussed it. It's very isolating for caregivers, very
Hmm.
hard. And I decided, no, I've got to make it really about that. And that's how the whole thing developed. And then I thought I wanted to caption the photographs. And that became this poetry adjacent spare text.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, do you want to share? So we have this one portrait.
Sure,
Do you want to share the poem next to it
of
too?
course. Why do family caregivers do what we do? Is it an instinct to protect, a willingness to sacrifice for someone we love? Is it responsibility, guilt, lack of options? Or is it perhaps an understanding that we can do no less and the hope that someone else would do no less for us?
Yeah, and then here's that portrait again on the opposite page. And just beautiful work, Judith. And so
Thank you.
So why do you think that is such a, I don't know if taboo is the right word, but an overlooked subject, the role that caregivers play and the difficulty with it? I think it reminds me of all of the, when they talk about like cancer survival and like this positivity we have, but we ignore like the struggle that it actually is dealing with it in a lot of ways. And so why do you think that is that we don't, tend to, and even, this book has been out for what, 15 years plus. But even now to this day, we don't really talk about much the struggle that people go through taking care of people with dementia. So why do you think that is?
When I was traveling, as you mentioned, I traveled around the world advocating. And on behalf of caregivers and for patients as well, one of the things that I found at that time, and as you said, this was quite a while ago, is that other countries seemed to be more committed to caring for the caregivers and making it a greater part of their system.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen a lot of change in the United States in that regard. And one of the things that I did in this country is I was asked to speak to um, a senator who oversaw health at that time and whatever the related programs were. And I was speaking about, and corporations were there as well, heads of corporations, speaking about how corporations need to get involved more. Our system really isn't set up to give people who need time for themselves as well as just the caregiving, which is so difficult. Um, we haven't made any changes in that regard. So there isn't even a lot of conversation about it. There's certainly not enough. And I think it's going to just keep getting worse in the immediate future. And
Yeah.
I, I, I don't know why. I think that we just don't make it important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think you wanted to share a few of these. What else would you like to share from the
Sure.
book? Yeah.
How about page 35?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everyone tells me to take care of myself. Everyone tells me I need to take more time for myself. Everyone tells me that if I don't take care of myself, I won't be able to properly care for Ed. I know everyone means well, but I need help, not advice. These are some of the things that help me cope. Friends, family, and a support group. My personal favorite, though, is mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Yeah, so they're bringing a little bit of humor into it and the
Yes.
that raw honesty as well. And interestingly, a lot of the pages have, it's a photography book, but there are a lot of blank pages where there's nothing contrasted against the prose, the poetry sections. Here we're looking at the next photo, though. This is your husband sleeping with a cat on the next page. Another beautiful portrait.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Could we go, because what I'd like to read, because you'll see why.
Hmm.
Page 65.
Yeah.
I do like that photograph with the cat, though. Thank you for mentioning that.
Okay, so here's 65. Yeah.
And you're showing the photograph?
Yeah, I'll show the photo here.
Okay. I told Ed that some of the photographs I took of him saw straight through to his soul and asked if he minded being that exposed. He said, "No, you can show my soul, just don't show my penis." So that's our agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this might also be interesting if you want to talk about it. The question of writing or photographing something that's intimate about somebody else
Mm-hmm.
and what that is like for different people. It's different for different artists. And it was always something that I kind of struggled with when I interviewed people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very important to me to be sure and comfortable that Ed was okay with what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if he had said no, I would have stopped a project that was very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad he didn't because I think I think this is an important part of the advocacy.
Yeah, it is always such a difficult question to being, it's so important to be open and vulnerable as an artist, but then bringing other people into it is a whole different dynamic. And whether or not you have permission is a really important question. How did you know for sure that he knew what you were doing and what you were going to do with it and that he would approve? Was that a difficult thing to be sure of?
That's why this question, this brief conversation with him was really important to me because at that point, he was at a point where he could give consent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at another point, uh, there were two publishers who wanted to publish this book, and I selected the one that I did because I thought they would do a beautiful job, which they did, but also I thought they would have it to me faster than the academic publisher would.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to be able to present it to Ed when it would mean something to him.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it was published, which was a year later, he didn't know what a book was anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it meant nothing.
Yeah. What was the progression of the disease like, and how long did it take from the first time you noticed something was up to a diagnosis to then getting to that level at the end?
Right. Before we even married, it had occurred to me that he might have dementia.
Hmm.
There was no certainty, of course, so nothing even close to that, but I felt that he might have. And my late husband, who was a friend of his as well, um, also made a comment in passing before he died that he thought that Ed might be having memory problems. But I loved Ed a lot, and I knew because I was a good caregiver for Jerry that I could be one for Ed if that was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't diagnosed, he was diagnosed 3 years after we were married, and he lived for 16 years after diagnosis. So that means it was a very long process. And there's a lot of anticipatory grieving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing
uh,
that we often I think don't think about is how long it goes on. It's similar to natural disasters in the South Carolina right now. You see the big disaster, you know the impact of that, and then you kind of forget, but the people deal with that for so much longer than it's in the news. And 16 years is such a long time. Can you describe that experience of sort of pre-grieving? I mean, it seems like there's so much time to come to terms with the loss that it's almost must be maddening to have so much time, it seems.
there's just nothing about it that's easy. The process for so many people, even diagnosis for most people, can take years. Um, and you never know for sure at this point until an autopsy as to whether or not it was Alzheimer's or a different type of dementia or something that had similar symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
16 years is very wearing on the caregivers, the family members, friends, and on the individual. It's pretty horrific. I think it's probably all diseases that hurt people we love are hard, but this is particularly cruel. It's a very cruel disease.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. What do you want to share next, Judith?
Do you want me to go to a poem or do you want me to just do
What,
you want to stay in the book for a little bit
whatever you'd
longer?
prefer. Yeah, all of this is
Okay,
great. Whatever you'd prefer.
let me see what I've got here. How about page 73?
Okay.
This disease is a shapeshifter. Sometimes it almost looks human. Then it twists, warps, and snakes. And it grabs hold of Ed and me, and it squeezes. and squeezes and squeezes.
Yeah. And so such just clear descriptions of what's happening. And again, another one, without a photograph on the opposing page. So it feels, you expect a book with mostly photography, but then there are captions to the sort of silence in between the photos too, which was a really fascinating choice. Why did you choose to do that?
It's heavy. The subject is heavy, and it's sort of like poetry. You sometimes use white space to allow for breathing room. And it was that same decision in the book in terms of the design of it to allow for somebody to take a breath, basically. I'm going to shift to a poem now, specifically because the poem I just read is one that inspired one that then became a poem and will be in my manuscript if it gets accepted. So this poem is called Alzheimer's Didn't. Alzheimer's didn't. Alzheimer's didn't trumpet itself. I didn't detect its high frequency sounds, didn't spot its webbed wings, sharp teeth. It descended, blue-eyed and furred, nuzzled your calves, settled in your lap, circled its tail around you, took time.
Yeah,
You
another
can
great description of that.
almost see, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just another great description of that time there personified by yeah.
But you could see where it was kind of inspired in a way by some things that they're in conversation with each other, the two manuscripts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to read Table for Two.
Sure.
Once our bellies held Peking duck, asubuco, shrimp scampi prepared with lemon white wine sauce. When the time came for plain food, I baked chicken, minced it, plated it with canned carrots and peas. When that became too complicated, I spooned applesauce into his waiting mouth. And when he turned his face away, refused to eat, to swallow, I nodded, set aside the puree and bowl, lifted from his lap a linen napkin, folded it in half.
Yeah. And so a great poem about the acceptance of it. Was that one of the harder things to do, was to sort of not resist and to let him be how he was going to be?
You're talking about things that are really important questions. And I think any of us who have dealt with death, and especially different kinds of death, deal with some of these questions. My first husband was 53 when he died. It was of a very aggressive cancer, and he died a month after he was diagnosed. So there I dealt with a very different and equally awful experience of shock as well. Jerry, my first husband, even though he only had a month to live with the idea of his cancer, was a great role model for me in many ways. And he did write a journal during that month. And as young as he was accepting of it, and did not want to, there were no protocols. There was no treatment for the kind of cancer he had at that time. And he really didn't want to go through things that would just make not only his life more difficult, but ours as well. So I have a lot of thoughts about why I was able to euthanize my cat and keep her from pain. And, we haven't figured that out in this country either. So they're big questions, aren't they?
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, let's share something else. What do you want to read next?
I'd like to bend and tuck time. I'd like to bend and tuck time and space back on themselves, fold them like I'd fold a single square of mulberry paper. It's been too long since my tongue brushed the keloid scar on your shin, since my fingers slid down the keys of your spine. So I'll slot together dawn and dusk, shape a realm where you can live with me again, slice hours into seconds, and petal fold the dust of stars into a nest for us.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. And really,
Thank
all your poems, Judith, that you're sharing today feel like really intimate love poems, actually. You know, they're poems that are dealing with death and grief and dementia, but there's so much love in the poems. I'm curious what your thoughts are on love and how that fits in with being a caregiver.
It's a good thing, love, Tim.
Yeah.
And those of us who have it are very fortunate. Um, this sounds so corny, maybe, but as difficult as being a caregiver is, to be able to offer that to somebody we love, is also a privilege. And prior to Jerry's illness and death, if you had asked me, would I be a good caregiver, I probably would have said no.
Hmm.
But I was, these were men that I loved who were important to me. And as I said in one of the lines from the book that I read, I hope nobody would do any less for me.
Hmm.
And I think we all hope that.
Yeah. Let's read another one, Judith.
Okay, Meyer lemons. The dwarf variety takes days to unroll its closed white buds, uncork a heady fragrance that tangos across my balcony, conjures the tree my husband and I once planted in the heart of our garden. From it, we picked fruit to have, then squeeze into tea onto freshly grilled fish. The same tree that later shaded our cat's bones, then my husband's ashes. Before I moved, left behind shaded remains and the citrus tree. I visited my widowed father, gifted him a bag of golden lemons, little suns, buttercups, synchronized flares from fireflies that returned me to a memory of my aproned mother in the kitchen, steeping tea in a porcelain pot, old country roses painted on the lid. Near her at the counter, my father slicing lemons, dark hair slicked back and parted on the right, hands unspotted, fingernails newly clipped.
And that was Judith Fox reading Meyer Lemons. I wanted to talk some about your writing process and how that relates to photography. We've already seen in a lot of these poems that you have an attention to specific detail, which seems like the heart of photography too. And so I'm curious how those two relate for you and why one becomes a poem and what doesn't. What's the interplay between those two mediums for you?
Well, the latter part of your question I can answer quickly. When I'm immersed in something, whether it's my business, the photography, writing, whatever it is, I am really immersed. And I dream poetry nightly. Nightly, I am in my dreams, I'm revising a poem, I'm writing a poem, I'm trying to remember a line because I know when I wake up, it's going to be the greatest line ever written. So while I can interweave some of these things, my real focus for the last 10 years has been on poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So when I photograph, it carries a different weight and a different intention
Hmm.
for me now. But maybe to answer the first part of your question, writing poetry, taking photographs helps me see better.
Hmm.
I literally zoom in and focus in a different kind of way, quite literally with a camera. And in the same way, when I want to write about something, a poem my most recent poem, or one of them, is about an orchid that I basically thought I had killed, and it was almost a deliberate killing, actually. But it came to life a year later, and I'm watching it minute by minute, it seems sometimes. And because I'm writing the poem about it. And so it might be, if I wasn't into poetry, wasn't into photography, I would see a pretty orchid, with purple freckles. Um, and I'd like to look at it. But this is a different kind of focus.
Hmm.
And I don't think I have a good visual memory. I have to really work at that. And I sometimes use photography to help me when I need details for a poem,
Hmm.
or when I would paint for that matter. So does that kind of answer some of that?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. And I'd like to hear more about how you approach, making a photograph. What are you looking for? What is it about a photograph that makes it memorable and moving in the way that a poem would? Is there some kind of, I don't know, is there a thing that you're looking for when you're making a photograph?
Well, certainly things like composition and something that interests me, and light, and there are tools just like there are craft tools for a poem. But there's a huge variety, just like there is ultimately for me when I choose to write about something. So there's some of my photography that people have said reminds them of work by William Eggleton. And it may be just the way a bicycle is leaning against a car on a city street. It could be a shadow from a hydrant,
Hmm.
or it may be a gorgeous landscape.
Hmm.
I did a series of photographs that were in a museum, um, from an 8-story balcony above the water, and focused on what body composition and relationships in the water. I could have easily written a poem about, not as easily. I tried and it didn't work.
Hmm.
But there's still subjects that appeal to me that I would like to turn into something creative that works for me and hopefully for other people as well.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find that you're trying to express the same things in the two mediums? Like there's something about poetry where we're trying to articulate the inarticulate. We're trying to, bring new order from the chaos of our experience and all the complicated ways that it's, sadness is more than sadness and, all of that. Do you find that's the same thing going on with just visual art generally? That you're trying to explore the maybe interstices of our understandings, or is capturing beauty and that part of it more the essence? I always wonder about that with art. Is it like the visual, how striking an image is? Is that the more important part, or is that like the craft on a poem underneath the heart of it, which is really expressing something that we can't quite express yet?
I I I think I think all of that is true. And it's been interesting to me too how there are, other than the obvious that we're discussing here, other similarities between photographs that I've taken and poems that I've written. And I do a fair number of ekphrastic poems. And one poem that I could actually read now because I've got it with me, was inspired by a photograph that I took a long time ago.
Hmm.
And the photograph was of the decaying remains of a fox. And one of the things I think about a lot too is um, decay and destruction and beauty, and how they can be the same thing. And if I may take a minute and just show you the photograph that you selected to be an ekphrastic challenge. And this was also part of a series where these were paper posters in downtown New York that had originally been advertisements or whatever they might, that I think they were mostly that. But part of what appealed to me is something that could be tossed aside. It's decayed, it's dead, it's done with, and finding the beauty in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's hear the poem you mentioned about the fox. But before I should say, this that time in the show. If you have any questions for Judith, please leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass some along. There are already a few, and it helps, like people have done already, if you put question all in bold so I can see it quickly as I'm scrolling through the comments. Also, if you haven't clicked the like button yet, please do. Always twice as many people have watching live as have clicked like, and that always helps if you click that like button. So do you want to share Still Life next?
Yes, exactly. Still life. Fallen leaves fleck the carcass. Goldenrod flanks traces of the thready tail that once curled and warmed the fox in winter. The remains of tapered ears, once alert to rodents digging underground. Would I still choose to photograph this vixen if her amber eyes were blinking, long whiskers twitching, if her rough tongue were cleaning her fur? In the woods there's no hourglass or candle. Even so, this corpus, these scattered Winston butts and Trojan condoms merge with earth and leaves to form a still life. Temporal memento mori like the cigar band around my father's corona, the snap-down brim of his gray fedora, his pale skin taut and parchment-like as he lay dying.
Yeah, another poem with beautiful description of the Still Life by Judith Fox. There's some great questions already, but I wanted to ask you first, since you mentioned the Ekphrastic Challenge and having artwork in there. I was wondering what your experience was like in selecting poems for that. And, there are a lot of people who will watch this every week and are participating in the Ekphrastic Challenge too. So do you have any advice for them, having been on the other side of the desk, about what it was like reading those poems and coming out on top? What was it that any patterns that you saw? What do you remember about that experience?
First of all, I remember that it was fascinating being on the other side of the table, and judging, and that I found it an incredibly weighty responsibility. I don't know how you guys do it. It's tough, and in reading the poems that I used to make my final selection, so many of them was so good. And I think what I could say, and I'm going to project and assume you feel the same way, there could have been 5 out of the 25 that I read that I could have selected.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes down to it could even be a random thing. It might be my mood at the moment, what spoke to me at that particular time, because again, these are quality works. I mean, the poems you narrow it down to are all good. And so it's just, I think ultimately, in part, it was my impression of how the poets saw the work that I had sent to you and that you chose, what their interpretation was. And none of them were really mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't matter. It was great to see the different ways the poets made it their own,
Mm-hmm.
I loved the process.
Yeah, what do you say that making it your own was the key to it? That the most fascinating thing, because to me, I think you can't really change what you're fascinated by, and what's memorable to you. And so what it is especially apparent with the poetry prize that we do, because there's so many entries. I mean, we have like almost 20,000 poems submitted there, and you end up reading, as it narrows down, you end up reading more and more frequently those poems. So the winner is something we've read 20, 30 times by the time we pick it. And it's the one that never gets boring, and you never sort of forget. And over that span of time. Like you'll come back to it and say, "Oh, I remember that," and then you're excited to read it again, and that's
Um,
really all it comes down to. And so, so did you find that poets that went in a surprising place were the poems that you were most drawn to?
it's a while ago,
Yeah.
and I don't want to make shit up. So, um, I don't remember. It
Hmm.
just, one ultimately rose from the five, in my mind, the five
Yeah.
finalists.
Hmm. Yeah, well, sorry, I always wanted to, do what I call a debriefing of one of the winners, but I never have. Um, so here are some questions, some great questions here, really deep ones too. Kimberly Gibson Tran wants to know: do you see images as stories, or look for ways to read stories into images? Is there a directionality there?
I know with a lot of them, I end up making up my own story. For instance, the ones where I was talking about where I photographed, it happened to be a large group of women who were swimming in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a series out of that and I titled it Sirens because I was watching them and photographing them over a period of time. So I definitely made a story out of it. And they were sirens, and I was watching their body language and how they rejected the one male swimmer who came into their group and tried to flirt with them, and they threw him out like the sirens, the sailors. So, and that is a very interesting question, Kimberly. I think it's both, and it
Mm-hmm.
depends on the situation and the moment.
Yeah, and there's a follow up too from Shape of Soup. Um, and he asks, related to Kimberly's, would you describe your poetry creation as an inside out process, even when inspiration is something external? That's a. What do you think about that?
I think different poems come about in different ways, but it's always inside,
Mm-hmm.
and even when it is responding as Greg did to an article in the Times, it's from the inside, why that article as opposed to all the other articles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's all about us, isn't it? And
Yeah.
from our brains.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Sure. I'll read something light.
Okay.
Stalemate. Do you have that?
Yeah. I'll just find it. But yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Stalemate. When stuffing a king-size duvet into its newly washed cover, matching long sides and wide, a partner might find a sock in the corner. It helps to be two. But is that reason enough to date? I don't mind lugging stuff to a dumpster or replacing a bulb, but when I'm hurt by a friend's harum-scarum remark, it would be nice for a partner to say, I never liked her anyway. And if I was sure he could drive, cook, and if he promised to massage my feet, outlive me, maybe then I'd consider love again.
That's a great. I was on that Stalemate by Judith Fox. Um, Another question from the audience here. Dick Westheimer wanted to know if you could talk about negative space in your visual art versus negative space
Ah,
in your poetry. And so there seems to be a lot of both going on in each of them.
yeah. That's really an interesting question because I tried for years to write a poem that I had titled Negative Space, and I never got it the way I wanted it to be. But I think it's important, and it's something that I've played with. You haven't seen any of those poems here, but I do use space in some of my poems. And it's one of those things I'd like to expand on more. And I think the use of space, period, in poetry is interesting. And lately, I've just started reading Headwaters by Ellen Bryant Boyd. And
Mm-hmm.
what she's done, she has no punctuation now, and she goes from left to right, so she's taken space in a completely different direction for very different reasons, the absence of it and what she sees that doing to her, to and for her readers.
Mm-hmm.
But I like spending time on line breaks, and I find that there are about 5 different ways I can break a line. And negative space and enjambment and all of that is part of the issue of negative space. And in art, painting, photography, it can have enormous impact.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for 2 more poems, maybe. Do you want to read the second to last
Sure.
one? Did you can share?
Sure. Which is the second to last? Let me
Oh,
pick
whichever
one.
one you want, but we have time for 2
Okay.
more, I think.
I'll pick this one. Okay. Shoes. How about Shoes painted by Van Gogh
Sure, yeah.
in 1888? They stand on tiles whose red and yellow pigments mirror slowly ripened peaches, palmed here and there by sun. Unattended, smelling of crusted hose and loamy soil, the shoes lean at their heels, once against the other, one against the other, waiting for the familiar slope of the farmer's feet. After years spent hitching horse to plow, cultivating fields of wheat, oat, and barley under a fierce swirl of gaseous sun, the peasant and his shoes are weary. But this oil on canvas, this still life, isn't still. These shoes vibrate, ready to rise, break into a jig. The leather laces that tie them twitch. And who's to say these shoes aren't his, but hers, molded by the feet of a raw-boned woman who scrubs these tiles, stokes the flames, tends to pigs, paces this room with a wailing infant who draws milk from flagging breasts. When the fire in the hearth turns to embers, when she tugs off her shoes and sleeps, may she dream of climbing on the horse's back, and may that horse be flying.
Another beautiful poem. Another ekphrastic poem, Shoes, painted by Van
Yes.
Gogh in 1888 by Judith Fox. So we haven't really talked about your writing process itself, and it seems to me, these poems feel like it's less about having, trying to find something. It feels like you have a lot of things you want to talk about and write about and share emotionally, and your thoughts and memories. Do you ever have trouble facing the blank page? Do you sit down to write and things just come out? Or what is your writing process like, as far as that goes?
Um, I am a constant reviser, which I know you just love, Tim. And my challenge is, yes, how to keep revising, and not sucking the juice out of the poem. And that is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a tough one. But I do revise a lot. I do a lot of things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I my process is I come into my office in the morning and I sit down at my desktop and I work off of my desktop. I may revise. I may start a poem that I want to write. I did maybe the orchid, maybe any number of things. But what I do wrong is I can't help but start lineating and coming up with stanzas from the beginning. I
Mm-hmm.
know that's not the way to do it, but it seems to work for me until it doesn't. Um, so it's a way that I've just learned to do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't go through a formal program, although I'm at Pacific University and I love them now. Um, it's a habit that works for me and I don't want to break it, although I recognize the other tools and may use them from time to time.
Well, it's interesting. As Out of Writings just said, I love how she does things wrong, and you own to that. But at the same time, I don't think that there's a wrong at all whatsoever to that. I think I think a lot of poets do go, the first few lines form the feel of a stanza or the shape of the poem, and that's really one of the pressures that pushes the poem forward. So I think that's not unusual at all, actually. But when you talked about revising a lot, what are the things that you usually end up doing in your revision process? Is it cutting things out, moving things around? Do you rewrite altogether? What are those revisions like?
I've probably done all of those. I'll change the format. I will try to heighten the verbs, improve the images, get the line breaks right. Um, Cut out anything that's extraneous. I clearly lean towards spare and short poems. Um, I'll always be open to that magic when something appears that you didn't expect, and suddenly it's your fingers that are bypassing your brain and coming up with a line that you love.
Mm-hmm.
So it is all of that, but I've revised some poems over for years, and I have a folder that's just called works on, where I put old versions that have not gone anywhere, and I'll go back to them. And
Mm-hmm.
I am persistent.
Yeah. Well, Tamara Kreutz wants to know. She says, I was wondering if workshopping or if or how workshopping plays a role in finessing your visual art. I know how important the workshop experience is in written art. So that's something interesting I hadn't really thought about. Are there workshops for visual art? What's that like?
Everything I've done, including my business, I've learned on the job. So I've never I haven't experienced in photography workshops, but what we do have is reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of it is a form of workshopping, maybe in a way. Um, so I had been to a number of poetry reviews where you get to meet with top photographers, and they go through your portfolio and discuss it with you. And that actually is what led to um, one of the offers I got to get my book published was at a photography review.
And
Um,
so, yeah, so obviously, you do like that workshop experience at the Pacifica program. Um, uh, what do you find, that's valuable about that? Like, is the feedback that you got on your photographs sort of similar in ways to the poetry, or and how has it been useful?
I like the whole experience. And I've learned, I hope, over time to become a better reader and therefore someone who gives more helpful feedback. I think one of the challenges, for me at least, with feedback is because I respect the faculty members, I respect friends I turn to for feedback. And because of that, I take very seriously what I hear. And then the challenge becomes staying true to my own voice and deciding, and this would be true with photography as well, what I agree with, what I accept, what I can use, and what I appreciate, but am going to put aside.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we're about on time. What do you want to finish out with, Judith?
How about Point Reyes morning?
Yeah. Okay.
Point Reyes morning. The fog lifts and yellow poppies turn towards light. I slowly descend to the wetlands, scan for snakes, for nature's snags, inch my feet around purple needle grass. My animal hide alerts me to an osprey poised to dive into shallow waters, talons extended, head and body a coupling of brown and white. Since you died, it sometimes takes a raptor knifing a creek, mist that rises and gives way to sun, poppies that open and expose their hearts, for the joints in my neck to unlatch, my breathing to discover its rhythm again.
Yeah, another beautiful poem. Thanks so much for sharing that and all your work tonight, Judith. It's been fascinating and informative talking to you tonight and getting to share your photography and your poems, which are both so striking.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so once again, that was Judith Fox. You can find all of Judith's work. We can find I Still Do her in her other books and poems she's published around. You can find her Ekphrastic Challenge selection if you're curious about that too. I saw that there. All you got to do is go to Judith Fox, just like it sounds, Judith, Judith, Fox.com, and you can find all of that. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about the happiest place on earth. That is your prompt for this week. Write a poem about the happiest place on earth. If you've got one of those, join the Zoom and share it with us. And if you've a few guidelines, it's a 1-page max we'd like to go for, and the max time on camera should be about 3 minutes. So even if it's a longer, you fill up the page, just jump into the poem, read it quick, so we can keep everybody moving along. If it's a shorter poem, feel free. We get a little more chatty, but that's what we're going to try to do. Email your poem first, though, to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines, all one word, promptlines@rattle.com, and then join the Zoom link where Judith has been. And you can join the Zoom too, but if you email your poems first, we can show them on screen as you read, but only if you have poems to share. If you would like just to sit back and enjoy everybody's poems, just stay right where you are. It's the best place to watch because you get to see the poems too. So that sounds good. I'll be right back with more poetry.
I'm off now.
And we're back with our prompt poems editor and my wife, Katie
Yay,
Dozier.
I was hoping you were going to introduce you that way. Hi.
Yeah, well, great to have you. So we're married now.
We are married now. And I have to say, too, I love the interview with Judith Fox. I have to say, sometimes people you meet in person and they just make a huge impression on you. And she was one of those people. Like, I just instantly knew she was fascinating. And she is.
Yeah, well, she definitely is. Yeah. All right. So, it was a tough week to write a poem, but we did write poems.
We did. Oh, good. You did, too. We haven't talked since.
Yeah, if you call it that. And so what do you have for us this week?
I have a hymen.
Oh,
or
surprise,
a verse bun,
surprise.
I should say, a verse bun. These moments may seem somewhat familiar to you, Timothy Green.
Okay.
All right. Clocks. Popcorn doesn't pop itself. Even double rainbows must be conjured somewhere else. There are two halves of my life. The time before you faced me, I was alone out on the green with just the sun to speak of, pretending every word I wrote could disperse a fluffy seed. And one day you turned, marigold spring from winter. Your hand in my hand, we sundial gears. Now the winding wind alone figures out how to unlock years. Happily ever, ringing the bells.
Oh, it's a wedding poem too.
It is. And I learned, maybe I'm the last poet in the world to learn this, but I learned that the dandelions, like when they come up with their fluffy heads, they're called clocks. And I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't.
They're
I
called
didn't know that either.
clocks. Like, and then when I learned that, I was like, well, that's what I'm writing about. So
Well, that's really cool. And I love the haiku at the end.
thank you.
And I should say, everybody, I have a haiku, a monoku that Katie wrote inside my ring, which nobody can see.
A secret
It's
monoku.
a secret poem.
Yeah, a secret poem. Oh.
So, yeah, it's really fun. Anyway, and so
I think the engraver was like, what? And I was like, no, it's a monoku. It's like a poem. It's a single line. So I was like really using it as an excuse to get one more person to haiku that probably didn't want to be.
well, you always you have the converts.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
true.
good. They'll be doing it next. It's going to be a real hot fad, guys.
Okay, so my poem is this, a little short one. I did, kind of memorize, but here we go. The happiest place on earth. I just ran with it. The happiest place on earth. The narrow band of light peeking in between curtains could be midday's brightness diffused by the pleats of woven fabric, or the pure dyadic glow of a floodlight pouring in from the depths of night. There's no way to know. The clock by the bed is facing the wall, and our black phones are belly up on the nightstand. I could lie here for hours, guessing the hour, painting the still life, our life, with a single eye, half opened, nothing moving but the waves of your breath, my own breath rafting unmoored above them.
Aw, well, you wrote a love poem.
Well,
too.
yeah, I guess so.
I also feel like I feel the influence of like we learned how to use a steamer this week.
That
I
is
had to
true.
steam my wedding dress in the hotel room because I refused to pay somebody else to do it. And then refilling the steamer because you couldn't see the dress, which we managed somehow, even though you had to carry it all the way across
Yeah,
the airport.
and now we steam everything.
And now
because-
I steamed your shirt, and I saw Carla Schwartz complimented your shirts in the comments, so somebody noticed your shirt was steamed today.
Wow, well, that's the first time.
Yeah.
I used to, in Wrightwood, I could just throw the shirts in the dryer,
Uh-huh.
and it's so dry there that it just kind of like de-wrinkled really easily, but that's
A
not
little
the case.
different in the
It's nice and
woodlands.
a little different.
Yep.
Anyway, let's see what everybody has to share today. And let's start with Kimberly Gibson-Tran.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Kimberly, great to see you.
Yeah. Well, when I saw Katie's prompt last week, and it was about the happiest place on earth, I thought, on earth? That seems very restrictive. So here's my poem answer to that. Orbital story. We take turns tumbling to the starboard portal. The habit of direction, less meaningful without ground or down. We discuss the merits of hemispheres, the stars one can see from north or south. It takes time to find under clouds, longer to name the spaces we remember on the blue balloon. We claim our favorites, float asleep dreaming of the happiest patch, that charred earth at Cape Canaveral or Baikonur that sprung us into this uncharted dark.
Oh, yeah, beautiful poem.
Yeah.
That was really wonderful. Another way to get off the planet, too.
I like the Cape Canaveral reference. I have to say, too, we were eating dinner one night and we accidentally saw a rocket launch, which was really cool and very exciting for me. So
Yeah, and not only that, but Katie was like, oh, I should ask my mom if there was a rocket
because she lives in
launch."
that area
'Cause
and she
lives in
always
the
tells
area.
me. I used to watch them growing
And
up.
she'd already texted
She'd
to
already
say, "Look up
texted.
to
I
see
just
the
hadn't
rocket launch."
checked it, so we accidentally saw it, which was
Yeah,
fun.
that was fun.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for the prompt.
Yeah, thanks so
Thanks,
much for sharing that, Kimberly. Yeah, that was Kimberly Gibson-Tran with Orbital Story. Let's go next to Dick Westheimer.
Well, hey, all. Glad to
Hi.
see
Dick.
you back in familiar haunts without your Mickey Mouse ears on.
I know. I thought they weren't going to come off of my head. I wore them for so many days.
She
straight.
did. She had Mickey Mouse ears
I had
for
like
4
5
days
different
straight.
pairs.
She
It
did.
was serious. It was
There
serious.
was something about your prompt and then seeing you at the Magical Kingdom, which made me think, is this a marketing exercise?
Yeah, I wish they did not pay us to go. Quite the opposite.
Well, at least it was a time when not everybody else was on break. That's great. Well, good. Well, I have a little short poem to leave room for lots of other folks. And like Kimberly, I was sort of thinking about the earth a little bit as being, oh, I don't know, a little restrictive.
Mhm.
But I stayed on Earth. It's just that Earth doesn't stay in the same place, as it were. So this is a working title. The greenhouse occupies a different place in space each spring. The mix is always the same. 1 part each, peat and compost, a bit of water, and 2 hands burning with cold as they knead and stir and squeeze and make blocks of soil ready for seed. Add in an infinite measure of disbelief and a pinch of yielding as the Earth's axis eases into its adolescent repose. All this equals enough hope for me to peek at these pots under the lights most every hour of every day until a single sprout bows out of the soil. It is a forever surprise, like a vine deciding what shape it will take, like a leaf becoming loam, like the last line of a poem.
Yeah, I love that ending, and
Yeah.
I always love your gardening poems, Dick. I
Yeah.
really do.
And
Yeah.
your
I have
Ars
to-
Poetica poems that surprise you, hit you at the end. Surprised it was all about the
Yeah.
poems.
So I didn't need to label it in Ars Poetica. You got it.
I think I got it.
Good. Okay. I appreciate you two so much. And obvious congratulations are in order, but they've been in order for quite a long time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dick. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Bye. Yeah, Dick Westheimer with another great poem. The greenhouse occupies a different place in space each spring. Let's go to Amanda Harris next.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. And
Yeah.
I really and truly enjoyed the featured reader.
Oh,
So-
thanks. Yeah, me too.
So the first thing I could think of when I thought of this prompt was definitely the toy store. Okay. The toy store is a box made from the box that is the box. That means in some vague way that I am closer to heaven by having fondled its figures. Figures are a strip tease, but maybe also something more appropriate. A video game, a slipped love letter, a gun that begs for ammo but only ever gets flowers.
What
really
an interesting one. Wow.
Yeah, I love the leaps and turns there, Amanda. Really
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
It's so exciting when Amanda reads.
I know.
Very excited.
It's always going to be an intense
I know.
little
I
moment.
know.
It
I like.
really
I have to
is.
buckle up. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was Amanda Harris with the toy store. Next, let's go to Carla Schwartz.
Hi. Yes.
Hey, Carla. Great to see
Wonderful.
ya.
And yeah, great to see everybody and great to congratulate you in real time. And
Thanks.
and this is a short poem. It's called The Happiest Place. When I started to sing along with Roberta, you pulled me into your arms. I was listening with headphones, so you couldn't have heard the music too well. Except for the song, I couldn't help but belt out. Singing loud, I didn't know if I were in tune, but you're taking up my arms, holding me close, clasping my hand and spinning, strumming me right in our kitchen. No place happier than this.
Ah,
Aw,
the sweet love
that's
poem.
very
Yeah.
sweet.
Thanks so much for sharing that,
Aw.
Carla.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Yep. Bye. It was Carla Schwartz with The Happiest Place. Next, let's go to Matt Joseph. Hey, Matt. Oh, you're not getting any sound from you, Matt. But it's not muted. It's like not picking up. Yeah, it's the mic that's not picking you up. I think maybe the headset or something. We'll swing back to you and see. Like the microphone's not connected. Yeah. Okay. Let's go instead to Chelsea McClellan.
Hello.
Hey, Chelsea,
Hi.
great to see you.
Yeah.
Great to see you too. Okay, so I guess for the purposes of this poem, the happiest place on earth is the couple seconds that happen between having just finished a job and the anxiety that comes knowing all the things that you still have to do.
That's great. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's called Checkmark. If I could steer the pen, I think I'd stay inside your 2 short strokes, live with the proud, in peace, between work done and what awaits, suspended in the 2 strokes we're allowed. I'd keep myself mid-bloom, not bud, not flower. The flower knows as soon as she's been roused, it's time to seed the ground. I'll take the hour playing in these petals we're allowed, and then I'll die. And you will cross my arms, the final X that check marks work as done, as if forgiving me for all the harm it caused, suspending time in this delusion. But anyway, the pen's not mine to steer. I guess I'll do the next thing since I'm here.
Yeah, I love the last couple. I always love a sonnet. Thanks for sharing that, Chelsea.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, it was Chelsea McClellan with Checkmark. Let's go to Nancy Tennell next.
Hi there.
Hi.
I want to add my congratulations for your wedding.
Oh, thanks,
you.
Nancy.
That's just marvelous.
Oh.
Happy. There aren't too many places I'm not happy, so this was tough.
Oh,
But
that's good.
I went way back in my memory for this. So this is called the practice rooms. What an eclectic sound they made. Snippets of music heard through practice room doors, a cacophony of every major and minor key, an irritant to those in the Shelby Hall lobby. I heard horn players scat sing their melodies, trying to relieve their swollen chops. Ba-dee-ba-doo-bee, diddly-doo-da-bop. Drummers tapping rhythms on tables with their sticks, hammered piano keys in endless repetitions so finger memory could retain a Beethoven composition. These cubicles provided the perfect medium, lined up like a tray of garden flats in this conservatory designed to grow music, not plants. Those were the days of etudes and scales, before any accolades or audience applause, before the audition for the first chair position or contracts to play big concert halls. We realized that this place, where we struggled the most and received painful pruning from each mentor and coach, where we cried from frustration, gave mutual consolation, the place where any success took root, Shelby Hall, and its practice rooms, those poorly soundproof stalls, was the place we remember as the happiest of all.
Yeah, I really love that. Thanks for sharing that memory.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
I used to sneak into the music practice rooms long after the time I was no longer a music major at Florida State. That really took me back. I love those rooms with like shoddy pianos and like tiny.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much. Yeah, it was Nancy Snell with the practice rooms. Let's go back to Matt Joseph and see if the mic is fixed.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I can, yeah. Yep, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, you guys, for doing this. As always, every week I say it. So, happiest place on earth. Westport, New Zealand, 2001. The town furthest from all others, in the land furthest from all others. Our tin roof, a shelter from rains that came down like a pissed off God was driving freight train through our living room with its single natty puce sofa. I triple check puce and am reassured, reading a brownish purple color similar to that of a flea. Every surface in our kitchen a speckled altar to the lords of Formica, our ancient stovetops metallic spirals calling out from the temple beast.
Oh, hey, Matt, I'm going to cut you off a little bit.
Yankee couple.
Matt, the connection's not great now either. Do you want to turn off your video? Because I think that's just...
I will do that. Absolutely. Sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah, it's just a low bandwidth today for some reason. But you can keep the audio and that should be good.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is that better? Are you there?
Sorry.
Matt? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's pick up where we left off.
Sorry. All right. So getting instead a fresh squeezed Yankee couple, me, the newly minted doctor, you stepping for a moment off your smoking treadmill, set to English teacher. I remember trails that barely existed, weaving haphazardly through fern forest draped across a glacier's broad shoulders. An hour spent blissfully driving on the wrong side of the road. You, desperate savant, learning left-handed stick shift in 24 hours. The apocalypse empty golf course we ran hole to hole each Sunday. Walking Carter's Beach at dawn, the sky cleaved by a flaming meteor that may have been a shared dream. The dent in the wall, guilty scar where I once hurled my shoe after the third ER call. House to into a mortal night sky, unshackled from human light, the Milky Way, a river of stars filling my thirsty eyes. I remember not being home for awkward things, birthdays, and tribal gatherings. For just
Hey, Matt, it's breaking up. I'm going to finish the poem for you. Sorry, bud. Okay. I remember not being home for awkward weddings and birthdays and tribal gatherings, for distant cousin who crossed over into madness and killed her young children, for premature births and about-time deaths, for planes flying into tall buildings. I remember floating falcon high and weightless above our story, thinking the rest of the lines would be written soon enough, could wait for now, that this was for us, alone, our chapter in the land of the long white cloud, knowing, down to the vibrating cells of my marrow, that we would never again be this joyfully lost, this lonely together and free. Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. And sorry the audio and the video wasn't working, but yeah, beautiful poem and really takes off, and the ending is great.
Yeah.
Like a lot of your poems are, Matt.
Yeah,
So
that's true. I always look forward to where Matt's going to go in the ending. You know that you're going to read his poem and it's going to wind up somewhere than you started, which, man, imagine if we could say that about all poems. We'd be really doing pretty well.
We would, yeah. So thanks for sharing that, Matt. Yeah, and no worries about the technical difficulties. We'll get you next week. Let's go next to, Laura Berg.
Hi.
Hey, Laura. Yeah, great to see you.
I so enjoyed the wedding pictures. Thank you for posting. They're very beautiful.
Thanks. We've got some more too we should say we were going to share, but we don't have them yet from the
We haven't seen the photographer picture. We just had like random people that were there because it was just us at the wedding. So we got some people to take like random pictures of us, but we haven't seen the official one. So I'm really excited and we're going to share. That's why we decided to wait until next week because we thought we'd have a few more to share.
Yeah, totally true.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
I've got a little inspiration from an odd place with this one. Here we go. I'm reading Hughes Religious Landscape Survey. Maybe the happiest places are in the search itself. The idea that there could be such a list. Chiaroscuro on a butterfly's wing, the undulating fins of angelfish, jasmine at dawn, afternoon of a fawn, fireflies at dusk, stargazing, floating in a moonbeam. Maybe this is why we ache to fly. Maybe this is the reason, even now, that most of us say we feel a sense of wonder about the universe, and many fewer believe in hell than in heaven.
Yeah, beautiful. And you're doing interesting things with lists and things and moving in and out of voice lately, Laura. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Laura Berg with on Pew's Reading Religious Landscape Survey. Let's go next to Nate Jacob.
Hey guys, anything interesting happen this week?
Yay. Well, you're not wearing a hat. That seems interesting.
I know, right?
That's a bold move.
Yeah. I'm a little rushed. And it's warm this week, so we're all good.
Yay.
Congrats to you two. Happy for you.
Oh,
thank you.
And I wrote a short poem so that we could chat for longer.
Ah.
Just kidding. I just wrote a short poem. What do you call it? A verse queue? Is that what you called this?
It looks
Anyway,
Verse bun.
verse bun.
Yeah.
verse bun. That's it. Yeah.
Sure, whatever you want to call
Anyway.
it, Jacob.
I don't write these very often, so we're going to call it whatever you want me to call it.
Okay.
Called Somewhere Home. Let us ever pick up where we leave off. Another shared plate of another toast, even unevenly triangled, heavy on the butter, perfect half circles matching your mouth, bitten from the middle of each cut side. In the long morning stream of sunlight, you and your half glass of orange juice dazzle the daybreak, melt the butter, me in the shade feeling ugly, cold, old until you take my hand in yours, and the silent look between us is the rebuilding of every breaking down. Breakfast table, sun rising again after going down.
Oh, another sweet
That's
little
really
poem. Yeah,
sweet.
thanks for sharing that, Nate.
Out romancing us when we're the ones who got married this week.
Yeah, that really is.
It's like I'm still on my honeymoon around here too. So.
Aw, well, that's great.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, thanks so much, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Now, Nate Jacob with Somewhere Home. Let's go to Hamid Malik next.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Hamid. Great to see you.
You too. Thank you for turning my fan off. Yeah, we're so thrilled for you that I'm not going to keep going on about that.
That's sweet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, mine is flipped and found. When I wonder where I'm happiest to plan a visit to my smiles, every place I think of shrugs its shoulders, points some miles away, as if to say I'm lost. The beach at Wollongong rolls his eyes to heaven at my fully clothed foray into his club of skin so human, so unburdened by cliché. From inside the sun tent, I see thighs and bellies much rounder than my own, but these autumn leaves I'm pinned with feel like shame cut from my bones. I blame that garden full of apples, which locked its gates against my sass and bound my smiles with ivy to stop me going back. My magnet slides across the map to see where it might stick. I have a photo ready, my smile identikit. It grips a bit on Paris, on Pinot Noir and Baudelaire, but that's such a far horizon for smiles which might be there. Beside the map, my journal sits, pulls my hands from roaming to hold it with my pencil, sit back as words start streaming, slanting, twirling me to glide, to skim on this horizon flipped inside.
Yeah, great last line there. The
Wonderful
horizon
sounds.
inside. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Hamid.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was Hamid Malik with Flipped and Found. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt next.
Hey, Tim and Katie Green.
Hello.
Hey, Zach.
How are you newlyweds? How you doing?
We're good.
You guys look great. You guys look great, yeah. All right, so I got a free verse one tonight, and I'll just jump right into it.
Oh, a rare free verse from Zach.
Yeah.
I do write it from time to time. Home. Let me take my palette knife and scrape into existence a picture upon the backdrop of reality, your canvas of life. What was the happiest place on earth for me? Home was and is being near the man who worked, at times more than one job, to support me and protect me. The happiest place was not a place at all, but being near a person, the person you love, was being wherever you are, near a man who came home with sawdust or paint, sticking individual dark strands of hair together like you and me, or coming home in t-shirts so vibrant and obvious of a hard day's work with holes in the edges or paint splotches on the backside, I'd know what type of work you were doing that day without always being there. Just seeing what was on your shirt or not on it at night. No stains whatsoever on days when you're doing some skilled work, cutting and hanging bridal white trim, installing it against the walls of a house with a perfect yard and a white picket fence, so opposite of the way our lives became, painted white, white painted as smooth and clean and simple as a homeowner's mindset and outlook with a black and white life. Home can be the happiest place on earth for some. For others, home's connotation, when painted, might be the color of sludge black. For some, home, when the attempt is made to paint the picture of it with words, produces anxiety over calm, perhaps the fear of the blank page. How can you capture the exact flavors, the beauty and intricacy of the complexity of the simple word home? Home was so many different shades of color mixed in between dark and light, was different places and feelings and attitudes for me, and yet it was also wherever you are.
Oh, well, that's another sweet poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Congrats again, you guys. See you guys next week.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, that was Zachary Honeycutt with a home. And let's go next to Mike Bales.
By the time I get to you, I sound like I'm repeating everyone else. If I could say something new, I really liked the photo that was on Facebook. Looked great.
Aw, thanks.
Well,
Hey, and I don't mind hearing congrats, so nobody has to shy away from that. I appreciate every single one. Thank
congrats.
you. Thank you, Mike.
You know, it was great. Greater for your experience than me looking at your experience, but I'm starting to sound like people on this one comedy where they over-explain things and get themselves in trouble. For some reason, I'm writing about Ames. This is way back in the 70s. I just sent it to you. It's called Central Campus in Spring. Every April, it opened its arms, where young men and co-eds sat in blankets and ate sack lunches, nestled in the midst of trees in full bloom. The joyous notes of the campanile floated in a warm breeze, and I took a break from classes. I'd just met with my advisor in sociology, discussing my major in anticipation of what I could become. Fresh air I breathed, while clouds in the sky eased past like dreams under the watchful eyes of the sun. A bare-chested man with a ponytail threw a frisbee, and his black Labrador chased it down, while a graduate student took a break from her thesis. An anti-war skit was performed on the granite steps of Curtis Hall, while others passed, and conversations filled the air. I looked around, and there were students everywhere. They had come from all over the world. 3 days ago, the Visha Parade made its way along Memorial Union, a celebration. The school year was nearing its end, but my life had just begun.
Yeah, well, great memory again. Thanks so much for sharing.
Iowa State was voted, I loved it. It was voted as one of the most beautiful campuses in the U.S. if anyone wants to look at pictures of the Iowa State campus.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, definitely very cool. And those college days are sure a lot of fun.
Yep.
They definitely are. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. There's Mike Bales with Central Campus in Spring. Next, let's go to Maro Dowdle.
Hi, friends. Congratulations.
Hey, Maro.
Hi.
Yeah, how you doing?
Sorry. I'm okay. I'm recovering from being sick and having skin cancer surgery. So it's been a very wonky week, but I cranked out a poem anyway. And thank you. It's always fun to do it. So the only thing I want to say is that the you in this poem is not you, the prompt writer, Katie. It's you, society. So
All
just
right,
to be clear.
good.
Okay. I don't want there to be any
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. The title is Prompt, Write a Poem About the Happiest Place on Earth. It's a trick, isn't it? You want me to hand over some esoteric location where I'll be alone in a stone house constructed in the 1800s. The one with a red corduroy couch, pillow embroidered with the face of Frida Kahlo, a chipped brick fireplace holding last night's ashes, bed unmade, every window open. And yes, I'm there at the desk overlooking the river. There's my well-worn journal and silver pen. I'll even throw in those fall colors that make the town famous. I'll head out, then ride my big black trike down the old canal path, dip into Farley's, where I once bought every book put out by New York Quarterly. On my way out, that's when you appear with your scheming grin. But what about the children, you ask? Aren't you happiest when you're with them? And I'll tell you this. I resist bifurcation into good or bad parent. I won't be split like that. I'll admit, I never felt so inspired as when I first held them, the two best poems I've ever written. Yes, they're my lanterns held out against the dark, two notes that compose the song I can't live without now that I've heard it. But I didn't make them so I could make them my obsession. I love them, and I love being away from them. It's a paradox I've learned to live with. So step aside. I have my rental to get back to. I'm hungry, and it's time for lunch. Tables laid with strawberries, avocado, bread baked local. Burners lit for a pot of really good coffee. I'll pour a cup and drown your guilt trip in it.
Well, Maura, I think that's amazing. You managed to write a poem this week on top of everything. And then you also had a micro chapbook come out, right? Do you want to tell us about that?
I did. Sure. Yeah. It's just, it's a little old thing from Bottle Cap Press. I did it with them because they do kind of offbeat work, and I just like a lot of the stuff I saw coming out of them. So it's just, it's a little 15-page book, but it's just about my lifelong struggle with an eating disorder. So it's very personal, and I kind of, it was sort of hard to even decide to put it out there because it is so personal, and it's not something I share with people. But it just came together, and I decided it was worth it. So I'm happy with it. It's a nice little book. So, and it's my first real book. So
well, congratulations. I really look forward to reading it.
Thanks a lot, Katie. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, congrats,
Take
Mara.
care, heal, and rest up.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
Heal
you.
up, and so glad you could join us on a difficult week, but an exciting week too. Yeah,
thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Mara Dowdle with a prompt. Write a poem about the happiest place on earth. Let's go to Danica next.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Danica,
how
great
are
to
you
see
doing?
you. It's been a bit.
I've been lurking around. So I've been here. It's just been difficult ever since you made that rule that you can only read that week's prompts.
Yeah.
Just because of the way I write, the process of writing.
Yeah.
So this was an exercise in discipline for me to actually get
way to go.
Another love poem. My husband and I met online 23 years ago in January. Well, we met in person after meeting online in January 23 years ago. So I took the happy, I took the meaning of lucky or fortunate or auspicious. And so either the internet is the luckiest place for me, or this particular dating site was the luckiest place.
Wonderful.
That's great. Yeah.
One or the other. So anyway, lucky for us. You almost didn't respond. Piano fingers hesitating on keys. An American, 20 kilometers past your love search zone. But my Buckaroo Banzai reference had your geeky heart intrigued. Your Calvin and Hobbes cartoon versus my negative photo image, me back to camera on a boat, hair balanced in the breeze. 2 mixtapes, dozens of calls, and a 4-hour bus ride later, you appear in a cable knit sweater, me in my dervish skirt, and both hungry to the bone. After lunch, you pull me over on the sidewalk for a kiss, me wide-eyed, surprised, off guard, assuring you it wasn't the kiss, just the speed. We waltzed to the arboretum, everything so green, not yet concerned about the years that will weather us, nor knowing how daily we will proceed. The fortune all ours that my dear friend, now 16 years past, cancer, convinced me I might find what I was looking for, leaving footprints online. In the kitchen, you making fruit to see, in the kitchen, you making soup to freeze, our comfort food.
Oh, yeah, very sweet poem.
Sweet.
Danica.
Wow. That's really impressive. You really captured your whole beginning story in one poem. Wow.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I was just saying that it's no wonder the poems have been so sweet because of the prompt itself. So it's kind of nice after a rough week in some other ways that to come back and have really sweet love poems. So thank you.
Yeah, it definitely is. And thanks for letting us into that story. It was really beautiful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Danica.
Thank you.
Yeah, with Danica Dinsmore with Lucky for Us. Next, let's go to Rod Deasy.
Hello, good evening, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Rod. Yeah.
This sort of came out from the state of the national parks, which is where a lot of people go to find their happy places, where they're basically saying they need fewer visitors and more park rangers, whereas it seems to be heading in the other direction at the moment, which is unfortunate. But anyway, I started this poem off and it wanted to be a sonnet, so I wrote it as a sonnet, but then I actually ran out of space to fit all the things in I wanted to say, so I stopped with a question, but maybe I'll do a part 2.
Good strategy, yeah.
It's called The Search for Happiness, and I did put an epigraph in, which is, each man kills the things he loves. Oscar Wilde, The Ballad of Reading Gaol. Our happy places tend to move a lot. They're driven by those carefree, guileless joys produced by innocent young girls and boys. For adults don't do joy. We've lost the plot. But that's okay. For now there is an app that compensates for jaded, faded feelings and then scrubs our psyche to start revealing our childhood selves. And we can find the happiness we long for. This same app will list the happy places, most joyful hotspots. Now look at number 1. What have we got? A destination no one can resist. But when thousands show up and pack the space, can that happy hotspot still hold its place? That's the end.
Yeah, beautiful sonnet.
Yeah.
I really like that, Rod. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Good. Thanks.
It was Rod Deasy with
Good to
The
see
Search
you
for
all.
Happiness. Yeah, great to see you, Rod.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. And really love the sonnet form. Really well done. Here you read it. It's great, too.
I wouldn't have known you truncated it if you hadn't told.
All right. Yeah, that was Rod Deasy
Okay.
with The Search for Happiness. And
good night.
Yeah, good night, Rod. And then somebody asked if I'd repaste the link to the Zoom in the chat. Yes, I forgot to pin it. Apparently, if I forget to pin it in the chat, then it disappears eventually. So let me redo that.
It's back.
It's back. There you
Yay.
go. Okay. Now back to the regularly scheduled programming. And I think we'll do Chelsea McGlynn next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Chelsea. Great to see you.
Congratulations to you two.
Thank you.
So my happy place was the woods behind my parents' house. And I guess some reference you might need to know is that a chickadee says its name that it's called. It goes chickadee dee dee dee. So that is relevant for the end of the poem. the whir of wing beats. Sometimes it was swift and narrow, carving itself deep into the earth, crossed by a single running leap. Sometimes sluggish and wide, turned to swamp by the beaver's dam, and crossed only with tall rain boots or the sacrifice of socks. Rarely crossed frozen over and crossed with a sturdy stick to tap out the rotted ice in front of us. The tornado that chased us shivering into the basement bathroom laid down bridge after bridge for us, and we crossed with dry feet for years. Some things will always resist an aiming, not the babbling brook or racing river or sunny stream. No, it shook off all those names like a shaggy dog shakes off rainwater. The creek could only be the creek, like the woods were the woods, like the meadows' only names were big or small. And you, my chickadee, resist all names that the world smears onto your boots. Resist all except for your own loud, ringing call.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I love all the names that the world smears onto your boots.
Yeah, that's really
That's
great.
a great line.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I always wondered why chickadees were called that. Somehow I didn't put two and two together. So
I feel like I'm going to really remember that bird. I'm so bad at remembering bird facts, but that one I feel confident on.
Well, here's the even more interesting bird fact. The number of D's at the end of it is for how dangerous a predator is nearby. So if they see like a human, it's just like chickadee, but if they see like a hawk, it's chickadee, and they can actually count the number of D's, and that corresponds to how dangerous it is to a chickadee.
So interesting.
that
oh
would
my
really
god.
come in handy
So
hiking.
I'll know I'm really scary if I walk outside and there are a lot of D's after.
I know, right?
Really fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for sharing that, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Chelsea McGlynn with The Whir of Wing Beats. Let's go to Lola next.
Hello.
Hi, Lola. Great to see you.
Hi. Congratulations. There's
you.
so much love tonight.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yay.
So sweet. Okay, so the happiest place on earth, that for me would be Lafayette, Louisiana. And I wrote an ode.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's
great.
great. Use
Okay,
that.
so ode to Lafayette, Louisiana. Laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. I knew when we passed painted pelicans on every street corner, there was art beating in the veins of this place. Swaths of color, pepper red, moody blue, green pine covering building broadsides from sidewalk to sky. Some kind of art, too, in the way everything was warm. Rochelle at Shoney's, the easy smile she drew 1,000 times. Community coffee radiating through mug, hands, cold pieces of me, and the Bayou Bend in the way she said, "Baby." Everything an invitation to sit fireside with Evangeline's children, happy to have survived barbed marsh winters, now lyrics in fiddle songs. The pig is roasting, cochon de lait. Genuflect, give thanks. Raise your bottle, glass, or can every day to celebrate this being alive.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that and taking us there, Lola. Really fun poem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was Lola Willis with Ode to Lafayette, Indiana.
Yeah. And just doing an ode was a great idea for this kind of prompt, too. I like that. I wish I had thought of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go next to Nivedita. Hopefully she's still there. Should have swung by her
Hello.
sooner. Should get back to work, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nivi. How you doing?
She's there.
Yay.
Yay. Hi, Nivi.
Thank you. Congratulations to you guys. How you guys doing?
Thanks so much. Yeah, we're doing well, all things considered.
You guys must be tired and worn out. I love to see the happy looks on your faces. Makes it all so much worth it.
Aw.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so what do you
This is
got for
related
us?
to prompt, Katie. I agree with everybody who's sort of confusing a place.
I ended up picking the library.
Oh,
Anything with
that's
books
great.
in
Yeah,
it.
that is a happy place.
Yeah,
Is
that
happy.
is great.
So here's my poem. The library. Dust settles softly here, not as neglect, but as memory, as if the pages exhale stories when no one is looking. Spines lean against each other, whispering old wisdom, waiting for a hand to pull them into the light. Outside, the world rushes, cars swallowing distance. But here, time stills, nothing but the soft hush of a turning page. Happiness is the weight of a book in your palm, the promise that every ending leads to another beginning.
Oh, yeah, really
That's so
captured
beautiful.
well.
I
Yeah.
love that. Oh, that's great. That's why
Yeah.
I love reading. And that's
Yeah.
why I love holding physical books too, not just ebooks. So
Exactly. There's a charm to it that's just lost on ebooks and e-readers.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi. That's
thanks,
great.
Nivi.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Katie.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day. There's a
Thank
Nivi
you. Have a
Karthik.
good evening.
Yeah, Nivi Karthik with the library. Let's go to Janet McConaughey next.
This may not be the best, but it's probably the weirdest.
Well, that's always exciting.
That's promising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Revenge. I was a gallant galleon exploring exotic seas, pursuing pirates, returning laden with loot. I was an elegant elephant, bedecked in brocades and carrying a queen. I was a terrible tiger prowling through with our Prada, blazing like Blake's teeth. I was a superb stunt plane, a sky crayon drawing crazy leaps. My plush and open arms equally embraced acrobatic antics and the boneless drapery of children deep in books. But sunlight tapped my upholstery's bright orange background and brilliant lilies. Uproarious dogs and knife-clawed cats exposed my stuffing. Strangers kidnapped me while my last little girl wailed, "Not the comfy chair!" I'll show them. Just wait until they learn they'll have to disassemble me bit by heavy bit and tack by tack by tack, zillions of flesh-nailed tacks to change my aged complexion.
And then we have this chair.
What a chair,
That
too.
is some
That's an
chair,
exciting
Janet.
chair
That
to
really
me.
is.
Yes, I told the friend who owns the chair that she should write about the kid. But she said she was cursing too much.
Yeah, well, that's great. Really fun description of that. Thanks so much for sharing that, Janet. Yeah, it was Janet McConaughey with Revenge. Let's go next to Don Caskey.
Oh,
Hey, Don.
Hi.
Great to see you.
I had sent you a caregiver poem, but that's off subject, so I'll read instead a short, happier poem.
Okay.
And you can read the caregiver poem at your leisure. It was the caregiver poem was a prompt, obviously, to the in response to the guest. This one is just called Evensong. The porch swing softly growls where chain affixes eye hook at the beam. I say, I need to grease that, but my voice in the cotton dusk is a low-hummed song. The warmth of your body against mine, your sufficient reply. Who foresees when they strike the great adventure, the turns ahead? Who imagines in their wild young passion what guise will be assumed by perfect communion?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Don. That was Evensong was the title?
Evensong.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, that was Don Caskey with the Evensong. Another really happy place. Let's go next to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello, Doja Greens.
Hello,
Brian. Yeah.
Hey.
Great to see you. So also thank you to Christiana who sent me the link on the email to get back in because I got bumped off somehow. I appreciate that.
Oh, great.
I have a very weird one. It's somehow I got it from happiest place on earth to the gateway to hell. Just try to be different. It's called All Ye Who Enter Here.
Interesting. Okay.
Abandon hope. That's what Dante read on the wall. It makes hell's brink the happiest place on earth, for by the law of conservation of aspirations, hope, the first lilied whiff of happiness, though abandoned, can never be destroyed. It mounds up, sloughed off by every con man with a plan, every pharaoh who schemed to build a pyramid on the broken backs of the oppressed and enslaved. Napoleon dropped an alp of hope, like a finger saluting the sky, when he stormed the open gates of Inferno. He who saves his country commits no crime, he said, and though the little corporal saved almost nothing, another little man, though never a corporal owing to heel spurs, would stumble upon those words and weaponize them. But all that discarded hope waits also for those who fear that their republic is plunging into empire, but bracing themselves and standing together, decide that we who commit no crime will save our country. Or for one who almost succumbs to smaller fears, someone lying on a bed in a chewed-up motel on the outskirts of Orlando, let's say, alienated in the penumbra of giddiness, who at the bottom of his bottle tries to carve a full stop into his flesh, but carves a semicolon instead, hanging on for the next clause in a sentence bound for an uncertain but still unabandoned end.
Yeah, what a great ending with that semicolon. That's such a vivid image, Brian.
You took that semicolon to a different direction than the semicolon poem from before.
Yeah, I still think about semicolons.
A whole chapbook.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, great to see you. Thanks. Yeah, Brian O'Sullivan with All Ye Who Enter Here. Speaking of Christiana, let's go to Christiana next. Christiana Doucette.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Christiana. Great to see you.
I'm so excited to see you guys too, and congratulations. I know
thank
you've
you.
heard so many, but I'm so happy for you.
Thanks so much.
And maybe it was because wedding was on the mind. I wrote about a little bit about my wedding because
that's nice. Yeah.
Went to my grandparents' front yard, which is one of my favorite places in the world. Only it's not the way that it was anymore because they had to downsize and move to a smaller house. But they had a beautiful long front yard and this bridge that my grandfather built. He's one of the most brilliant men that I know. He used to service lasers to make holograms, and he worked on a tub, and he's just like so good with his hands at everything he does. And so their front yard was just gorgeous. It was full of gardens, and so we went there to take pictures. And the one other piece I wanted to give was I did a lot of things myself for our wedding. Like I made my own wedding cake. I made most of the food for the reception. And my mom bought like 300 bulbs of daffodils and planted them before to try to have them ready. But it was a really warm spring early, and so they all bloomed too soon. And I couldn't get them for my wedding, and I was so disappointed. And so that little bit of disappointment comes in at the beginning of the poem, but how I felt it was resolved in something that I still hold as one of my favorite and happiest memories.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, let's hear it.
The long green lawn. All the daffodils bloomed too soon that spring, or didn't bloom at all, their yellow gone like the early morning light May's dawn brings. We left the vacuum out by the organ, forgot the signing pen, the hall so full there wasn't room at all, the morning gone in a haze of I do, and a handful of homemade bouquets and hugs and kisses, forgot the signing pen, but heart so full we didn't care, suddenly a missus, a plate, pinwheels from the dash peeling out of the parking lot with hugs and kisses as husband and wife. We take the long route to Grandma's house and garden, to Grandpa's bridge, my gown pinwheels from the dash peeking out of the car door, down the long green lawn, which Grandpa didn't have time to mow this week. At Grandma's house, photos on Grandpa's bridge while the frogs I once caught wink in the creek. In the grass, iridescent buttercups. Grandpa didn't have time to mow this week. All our ever after bubbles up, plucking the iridescent buttercups. All the daffodils bloomed too soon that spring, but there's a sunshine glow our dawn may bring.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And look
Yeah.
at these beautiful pictures of you.
Aw,
Yeah.
Wow. How special.
Zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Aw.
Yeah, I love the form of that and just all the details and images. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I was
Thanks
trying
so
to
much
do
for
the
doing that.
terza rima, but it isn't an exact repeat of the line.
Well, you know, I prefer that anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's
true.
great.
Yeah, that's very great. Thanks so much for sharing that. A long
Thanks.
green lawn.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, that's Christiana Doucette. Let's see. Jared Campbell is up next.
Hey, congratulations.
Hey,
Hey, thanks, Jared.
So the Aristotle thought that happiness is the kind of flourishing that happens when when someone becomes what they're meant to be and performing that kind of excellence. So like a cheetah is happy when it's running very fast, an eagle is happy when it's flying, that kind of an idea.
Yeah.
So based on that, I said that the happiest place is where you belong.
Okay.
It takes just one sunset to understand why the prettiest place is the island of Skye. The tastiest place is Lyon. It's in France. I once had canals send me into a trance. The fanciest place is Geneva. I've heard the shopping that you can do there is absurd. There's places to give you whatever you're needing. But the happiest place is a poetry reading. The coffee shop regulars all seem confused as traditional forms are used and misused. A personal story is told, and what causes it to be a poem is feeling and pauses. At some point, a poet will read tired rhymes that jingle like dimes all the times that he rhymes. I think the sonneteer's hair is receding. The happiest place is a poetry reading.
That's great. I love that. That second half of that poem is really
that's really
fun.
nice.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks.
Jared.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jared Campbell with the happiness place is where you belong.
Feels like a sequel to The Beautifulest Bird is a Pigeon with the
does.
meter.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Mm.
Or Jared. And then next up, let's go to Tina Deniclaw.
Okay.
Hey,
Let's see, I
Tina.
unmuted myself already.
You did. Good job.
I did. I don't want someone else to do it for me. Okay, so mine might be just a little bit long, and it's self-explanatory.
Okay.
Okay, so Sweet Arrow. Oh, first of all, congratulations. What a beautiful wedding, even though it was so very personal. Like that whole trip must have been just, oh my gosh, so
It
special.
definitely was. Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Glad we picked
great.
that way.
Yeah, I
Thank
am
you.
glad we picked that way too.
Yeah, great way to do that. Okay, Sweet Arrows for the Heart. It was a private conversation when my dad was giving praise, softly dancing words under bushy eyebrows and glinting gray eyes, almost a smile, head angled slightly. He just barely leaned forward to the lucky one. I've seen the smiles back to him, starstruck and grateful. I have forgotten the words, but I know the feeling. Oh, I read this so many times so I wouldn't cry.
No,
I'm
that's all
sorry.
right.
Okay. When he taught me how to carry scissors safely at 3 years old, when I mastered my mother's bicycle at 5, what were his words that thrilled my whole little self with affirmation the year before I started kindergarten? They are hidden in the deep of my childhood mind, but I still can hear the gentle dance of his voice. You talk to people so nicely. My husband was pleased hearing me compliment a waitress's work. It is an easy grace. I learned to do that at the best place on earth, in the warmth of my father's praise.
Oh, yeah, very sweet poem. And then we have a
Thank you.
photograph too, Tina, of your father there. Yeah.
He was a school superintendent, so his
Aw.
habit of being very personable when he was giving praise was such an encouragement to students and his then teachers. And frequently in growing up, people would tell me how lucky I was that he was my dad.
Aw. Yeah, that's really sweet. Thanks so much for sharing that, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. That was Tina Dennettclaw with Sweet Arrows for the Heart. And let's see. Let's go to Mary Lisa D. Diminishes.
Hi.
Hi, Mary Lisa.
Hi, how is everybody?
Yeah, great.
Congratulations, you guys chose a great week to go away. You may have been like the only happy thing that happened to all of us this actually. So really hard time focusing, but once again I have to thank you, Katie, for the prompt. Yeah, I was having a really hard time pulling my head away from the news. So it was nice to write something that took me away from the rest of it. Okay, here it is.
Yeah.
It's a happy place, I think. A tiny bit of God. They want to know where the happiest place on earth is. How can there be an answer when the only answer isn't a place outside of ourselves, but resides within us and what we bring along to the spaces we take and delegate to emotion? The moon brings many moods, and the ocean too can soothe or disrupt, imparts its say on the coastline and the buildings and homes lining the mouth of the bay. In silence, they take what they're given and can't escape. We have the entire world at our disposal. Still, we search, relentless, for the perfect happy. And then on to the next, because by now we know that elated state of bursting with joy is sustained by self-regulation and a tiny bit of God, or good government and some money and a lot to plant a home. I suppose I'm the spot. The boy sits in the crook of my arm. The cat takes my lap. And suddenly I can answer as I become the warmest, the safest, the happiest place on earth.
Oh, yeah, really wonderful. I love that last turn.
Yeah, I like that title too. That's neat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Congratulations again, and thanks for showing up. You know, you guys have a lot going on, and you keep showing up. So, thank you
for saying that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
Mary Lisa. Good night.
Bye for now.
Bye. Yeah, that was Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with a tiny bit of God. And is that the last of the Zoom? Let me see. I think it is. Okay. Yeah. So let's see if Ted's got a poem for us. Ted Bernal-Guevara. Let's see. He's got happiest in sonnet form, he says. Also, congratulations. You may be happier than what the sonnet is trying to say.
May you be.
Or may you be. Okay. May you be. Thanks, Ted. All right, let's see what this is. Beautiful photograph. I like this. For them to read this wall with some blooming cherry blossoms next to it.
Sakura.
Okay. Better than that. Okay. And here's the poem. The happiest place. It's somewhere thin, your body can't totally fit in, just in the act of passing through the aim of that interim high. Your right hand may have gone in and out, but your left elbow has yet to enter. And if you hunger for this to be a sonnet, a thing of precise, you must collect all the iambic meters you can find and let it appear to shine in an immaculate sun settling among the mountains. It would open, too, this window to poetic blossoms. However, there is a misconception that you must do it fast. You don't have a choice to linger. The moment you fly out, it's time to come in. The idea of staying is just drawn on the floor plan, the structure and branching out. Happiness. Oh, some great advice there from Ted. Thanks so much for sharing that. The Happiest Place by Ted Bernal-Guevara. And let's read Dr. Q's too. I saw Dr. Q in the chat was here. Couldn't make it for the show, but here's Dr. Q, the DIY of living in extraordinary happiness. Okay. From Dr. Q. Embrace life as a fleeting spectacle, like it's the 2-minute warning. Tend to the pans in the front burner in swift and brilliant movement. Canoodle life in full spectrum of a dazzling display of color, like poppies blooming in a green field and sunflowers reaching toward clouds. Bask in life like a spotlight on stage, 1,000 fireflies in a dark night, a twinkling constellation moving in coordinated unison. Savor life with lasting impact, crossing the sky like comet's fiery ball, a trail that lingers after it disappears, a ripple in the pond sending out capillary waves. Yeah, you got great advice from Dr. Q, too. Thanks so much for sharing that. DIY of living in extraordinary happiness. Good advice, Dr. Q. Dr. Q seems to do that. All right, and that is going to wrap up the show for today. Let's go to the Sciku. And the Sciku is based on this article from, where is it from? Florida Atlantic University. And it is about the old narwhal, if you can see it here.
Aw, narwhal.
Yeah, drone
Yay,
captures narwhals using the tusk to explore, forage, and play.
I hope the play means like they throw rings around each other's.
Well, not quite, but they do sort of... they play with each other. So narwhals are a fascinating creature, the inspiration of unicorns and all that, because of this tusk, which is actually a tooth. But it's hard to study them because they live in very remote Antarctica, and we have some video and stuff of them. It's assumed that the tusks are like mating displays, and they also like sort of sword fight in a way, the two of them, which is fun. But we don't know a whole lot about what they actually use them for. And so these scientists at Florida Atlantic University had drones follow narwhals, little pod of narwhals, to see what they would do with their tusks. And it turns out they were doing all sorts of things. Aww. And one of them was kind of like playing like a little, fish football, like bashing some fish, to like passing the fish along and just messing around with each other. The other, and they kind of like use them for hunting and all sorts of things. So the little narwhals, it's not just a big weird thing at the top of their head. They really use that little sword.
Way to go, narwhals.
Yeah.
Using what you got.
Yeah, they're kind of playing and poking, and apparently they have a lot of sensitivity at the tips of those little things. So anyway, that was the little study. I just thought it'd be cute, having a cute little narwhal.
Well, it is cute. You're correct. That's my favorite part of Elf, too, when the narwhal comes out.
All right. And so here is the Sciku based on that article. While you toss and turn through the night, narwhal tusks. There you go. Yeah, while you toss and turn through the night, narwhal tusks. That is your Sciku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and spreading the poetry around tonight. Now, the prompt for next week, Katie, is going to be what? And I haven't even read this. I copied and pasted, so I don't even know. So I hope you got your contacts out.
I do, the right ones, unlike for the wedding where I brought the wrong contacts. All right. We are going to write a poem about a time that you carried more than you ever thought possible and include a reference to temperature.
Oh, temperature and carrying something. Interesting. Okay.
More than you ever thought possible.
More than you even thought possible.
Hope you like the prompt because you just found out what it is, Timothy.
Yeah, well, that's going to be fun to do. Okay, so that's the prompt for the next week. And next week's guest is going to be Katja Kuipers. Now, Katja has been in Rattle a few times. Her books all come out from BOA. They're really wonderful books. Her newest one, just out, is Lonely Women Make Good Lovers. And so it's going to be really fun talking to her. Katja does a lot. It's just a lot in the poetry world, and her books are really wonderful. So that's going to be the guest next week. Rattlecast number 284 with Katja Kuipers. In your prompts, write a poem about a time that you carried more than you ever thought possible and include a reference to temperature. So this is one of the ones no one's going to get away with having a poem that they didn't write on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I feel like people have been slacking a little bit on that regard.
Yeah,
You're going to have to prove it here, people.
No sneaking in. No taking. Yeah, okay. So that's going to be the prompt for this week. And the guest for this week, hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we will talk to you later. Oh, I should say, too, that we have a poetry space out where we did a dueling. We did a poet's duel, our very first of a new format, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great.
Bill Knott
and
Ruth Stone.
Yeah, that was really fun.
So that's out on the poetry space. Also, Critique of the Week will be back after the 1 week hiatus on Friday. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
And also, I'm reading submissions right now that we're due at the end of February to pick the next prompt poet of the month.
Yeah,
That'll be fun too. Yep. And then the categories will reopen once we have picked and it's ready to go.
Yeah, so good reminder that you can't actually submit poems yet for the prompt poem of the month category because we have to pick this week's or last month's winner before we start this week's winner. But once we do that, it'll be all open and you can submit there. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week with Katja Kuipers and a whole lot of great poetry. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.